Coming up on Folks, we'll be taking a look at the gang problem in Baton Rouge, how serious it is, and what city officials are doing to combat it. Then we'll tell you about a disease that is getting a lot of attention these days, osteoporosis. I'm Robin Hinton. Those stories and more today on Folks.
Everybody says folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks to live, folks got to give, folks got to care, ooh, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of us, ooh, touches us all. To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Folks. Well, look out, summer is just around the corner, and to some that means a lot of kids will be hanging out on the streets. So what, you might ask? Well, in Baton Rouge, a lot of city officials are concerned. You see, last year Baton Rouge experienced a serious teenage gang problem. Today, Sonya Masingale will tell us more about the gang problem in Baton Rouge and what city fathers are doing to minimize the impact.
The people who live in Baton Rouge often speak of the relaxed lifestyle here, the affordability, the friendliness of the place. We like to think of Baton Rouge as a nice place to raise children, but the crime statistics tell us another story. Crime in Baton Rouge jumped 25% last year, placing Baton Rouge 21st in crime among 468 metropolitan areas in the United States. The typical criminal is male, under 30, carrying a gun, and lately, traveling in gangs.
High unemployment and a sagging state economy are being blamed for violent gang activity in Baton Rouge. Representative Raymond Jetson of District 61 sees other factors promoting gang activity as well.
Well, it's reached epidemic proportions, and I from time to time say reluctantly, I might add, that it's like we've lost a generation of children to drugs and crime and violence. And we're looking at, in my opinion, the symptoms rather than the actual cause. We have not made a firm commitment to educating these children. But what has happened in a lot of occasions is we no longer have the church and the family and the school working together as a unit. So we just have a group of children who have no foundation, if you will, to stand on. So they resort to the results of peer pressure to involve themselves in gang-related activities, which brings upon the drug-related activities and eventually the crime and violence associated with it.
Frank Paxio, a detective with the Baton Rouge Police, also sees poor family relations as the main problem as he gives us a profile of a typical Baton Rouge gang.
The members themselves are going to probably range anywhere from 21 to about 15 years old. You might catch some younger, and they have their own little separate group. They usually call them juniors or small fries or something of that nature. Typical, come from broken homes, don't go to school. Those that go to school are in trouble all the time. Poverty, without money. I think not having a job or no money has a lot to do with it. And consequently, they end up forming a gang to get some kind of identity. And you're either in a gang in this town or you're not. I mean, that's just what it boils down to. And sometimes I don't know which one is worse, because the ones that aren't in gangs suffer from the ones that are in gangs.
When did this type of gang become noticeable in the capital city?
I would say about the spring of last year. Spring of last year. It was really when we first heard about it. They began by stealing cars. We had a big car ring, and it started right down in this area right here. Several of the children and the kids that were arrested came right out of the school. I made arrest right out of the school. And it started right in this area, and then it progressed. Next thing we knew, we had other gangs in town, and then we didn't have the violence last year. They had the fights and stuff like that, but I think the violence, since about the fall, since school went back, and it's progressively getting worse. Now everybody's carrying guns and sticks. Last year their thing was stealing cars, and now they're up in the violence, purse snatching, robberies, burglaries, and then fights amongst each other, and some of them being hurt and some innocent people being hurt.
How are these gangs different from gangs in other United States cities?
Gangs in other cities, I grew up in New York, and there had to be 3,000 or 4,000 gangs. I remember watching the movie The Warrior, which is probably really was about as actual as one could come. It became we call it turf up there. And it was an area, and it might only be 9 or 10 blocks, because you have to understand in 9 or 10 blocks in New York City, there might be 50, 60,000 people living there with the tenements and everything. We were the strong boys, more or less. We controlled that area. We didn't have outside crime. Crime that was committed by people who lived in there. We had a little extortion, maybe. But when we had gang fights, we'd go down underneath the subway, the L train, or behind one of the warehouses, and that's all that was there was 2 gangs, and they'd fight, and that was it. And it might stumble over a girl at a party or something that happened in school. Everybody had little jackets with their names on them and stuff. And up there, you weren't really forced to belong to a gang, but if you didn't, you were an outsider. You were an outsider. You get picked on a little bit, but it's down here, they don't even protect the community they're in. They prey on the same people where they live at.
Collis Temple of the Mayor's Council on Youth Opportunity doesn't see the increase of gang activity in Baton Rouge as an immediate danger.
Specifically, we don't have a major problem as such, particularly in comparing it to what goes on in Los Angeles and Chicago, in Detroit and Philadelphia and New York. Naturally, these are major metropolitan areas, and they have a history of being involved in gang-type activities, and I would imagine that it may even date back and be relative to what has taken place in the old gang war days of Capone and some of these kinds of folk. We never had those kinds of examples set here in Baton Rouge, nor have we nor are we at this time of such a large populace that it would create an atmosphere that a larger metropolitan area like one of those would, for youngsters to be involved in serious cross-town gang rivalry. We also don't have a high mixture of ethnic groups that may want to get involved in confrontations with each other. Hispanics versus blacks, or whites versus Hispanics, or Asians versus blacks. We don't have that larger population of young people that have created the kind of animosity that would generate that kind of problem. So when we talk about Baton Rouge being a potential gang problem, those are the reasons why we wouldn't rank or be considered to be as much of a problem as some of the larger metropolitan areas.
Now, the Mayor's Council on Youth Opportunity is calling this a potential gang problem, but the violence that these gangs perpetuate in the community is very real.
The accidental shooting of 6-year-old LaTonya White last year is the most widely publicized incident of gang violence. The 15-year-old gang member who fired the shot that killed her has not been sentenced.
There are unified efforts going on in many neighborhoods to combat the influence that these gangs have on the neighborhood children. Councilwoman Pearl George has one in action here at the Eden Park Community Center. Combining the efforts of merchants, educators, and church leaders in the area, this program seems to be working.
One day, me and Reg and them, you know, we used to go in the mall a lot every Saturday. And so we got into it with them boys out South Baton Rouge. We were fighting in the mall and stuff like that with them. We just got into it.
These are some of the participants in the Eden Park program. They talk to us about their efforts to go straight.
I was involved mostly with alcohol, drugs, gangs. I never was with gangs, but I was with drugs and alcohol a lot. And that's how I came to this program, you know. I found out this community center could help me in more ways than one, you know. so far it's been successful.
Yes, I was involved in the game called the Bird Station Devastators, and through this program, I had got myself together, and things seems a whole lot better to me.
I don't think of it as a game where I stay at. It's just like, you know, if I go out somewhere and some more than one person jump on a friend of mine, you know, I'm gonna help him out, just like he'll do the same for me.
George Horton is the oldest member of the group. He says that unemployment, alcohol, and drugs are the major reasons that gang activity is so widespread.
Unemployment is one. Drugs is another. Alcohol is three. That's three good reasons why. Family, parents. Them are the most motivating ones. And the ego. So like one ain't gonna let one say something to him and just get away with it. One ain't gonna let nobody else do nothing to him. You know, and they just got that. Their ego is at a stage to where they got to uphold it.
If they get a job and work, they'll start to think that, you know, I don't have to do the things I do, the bad things, to get what I want. If you get a job, if you get a job, you can, you know, make money and save and buy the things that you want, and don't have to steal them and do wrong things to get them. I learned that from coming here. You know, like Dr. Young, he showed me that, you know, I ain't really have to be out on the street getting involved, even though I wasn't involved, but being out on the street, you know, going to parties late at night, being out, you know, you get involved like that. Because, like, if I go to a party with some of my friends, you know, and I come there, they gonna say, like, where you from, you know? If you don't stay around them, that's how you get involved in a gang. That's how you get into fights or whatever. You got groups of boys that wanna, like, claim them a certain part of town, you know? But I don't feel like, you know, they own that. That's how you get into stuff like this.
Dr. Johnny Young, a psychologist and faculty member of Southern University, is the leader of the Eden Park effort.
And what I did, I would put one individual in hypnosis standing and have the individual open his or her eyes, and then I'd put say a 3-pound object in front of this individual and a 3x5 index card. And I would tell the individual that he or she would be able to pick that heavy weight up, and of course ask them to pick it up, and they pick it up. Then I would subsequently tell them that now this 3x5 card, try to pick it up. They would not be able to pick it up. And we had a beautiful discussion on that. Some little kids that don't normally talk were able to say what that proved, because the individuals, the volunteer individuals, were not able to pick this card up. Not even with both hands, they couldn't pick the card up. And they said this to me, that if you believe you can do something, you can do it, and if you don't believe, and they tell me, you told her that she couldn't, and she couldn't, you know, and they are saying this, and I go hug them, you know, because this is what I really want them to say, to see this thing. And so what we're doing is teaching them to believe in themselves. Mother have, father has, sister, or whatever, but God bless the child has got his own self-esteem, his own self-love, his own confidence, his own motivation, his own job, and that type of thing. That's really what I'm dreaming. I have a dream. Now, the dream will come true once I can get the parents to come out, you know, and like these young people, don't just send them, to bring them out, to come out here, because we can solve the problem. We just need to get them here so that I can show them what to do, because I know it'll work.
Community awareness and involvement, a better educational system, a stronger economy, and stiffer penalties for juvenile offenders will eventually lessen the occurrence of gang crimes. But we are facing one of the worst economic years in the history of the state.
The spring is over. The weather is getting warmer, and it's going to be a long, hot summer. What should we be doing to fight this problem now?
We need to start finding ways to do something for and with the children of our community. You know, I don't mind Devil's Workshop. We need to start making jobs for the young folks. But that's difficult with the economy that we have here when adults are having problems finding jobs. But we're going to have to more than ever make a dedicated effort to keep our children busy, to give them something to do, to send them to vocational Bible school, to send them to summer school, to find them a part-time summer job, to take them on a trip, to do something so they won't fall prey to what is waiting on them. The optimist in me says that through study, through prayer, and through action, we're going to find a way to really address this problem. And we're going to begin to work with our children, and we're going to begin to really feed their minds as well as feeding their bodies. And that not this year, maybe not next year, but in a short period of time, we will begin to see changes. And we will begin to see the situation becoming more positive than it is now. The realist in me says that if we don't do that, then the incident that happened the other day where the 14-year-old shot the gentleman and killed him is just the tip of the iceberg.
We now have a medical story about a disease that is receiving a lot of attention these days, osteoporosis. And as Sonya tells us, it affects about 1 in every 4 women over age 65.
1 in every 4 women over 65 has osteoporosis. More than 20 million Americans, primarily women, are affected by this disease, and more than $6 billion is spent every year on health care associated with osteoporosis. Yet this disease is preventable and treatable.
Osteoporosis literally means porous bones. It is a degenerative disease that's characterized by progressive and abnormal bone loss. Now, it leaves the victim of osteoporosis susceptible to bone fractures and complications due to those bone fractures. What is osteoporosis? Who gets it and why? Dr. Pete Prosser treats osteoporosis frequently. Here's what he had to say.
Well, anyone can get osteoporosis. There are certain groups of people who are more susceptible to it than others. The major ones here are women get it much more commonly than men do, and certain racial groups get it much more commonly than others, specifically the white and yellow races as opposed to the black races.
You say that Caucasian women are more likely to get the disease than black women. Well, what is it that protects black women from the disease?
This has been greatly studied and is still unknown.
What are the symptoms of osteoporosis?
Osteoporosis itself usually is an asymptomatic condition until a bone breaks or fractures. There are certain types of bone diseases that do cause symptoms such as bone pain. Osteoporosis, on the other hand, is asymptomatic until a weakened bone from osteoporosis breaks, and then you have a symptom. This is often seen in the spine where what are called vertebral crush fractures take place, also in the hip and wrist area, very common places. It's because it's not a problem that causes symptoms in of itself. It weakens the bone, and then the bone breaks, and then you know you have it.
How do you treat osteoporosis?
The rate of bone loss can be prevented in women after the menopause by the use of estrogens. There are other types of drugs that can be taken, for example, an adequate calcium intake, vitamin D in an adequate amount, sunlight exposure. There are other types of drugs that can be used to treat osteoporosis and prevent bone loss, but probably the single most important factor would be the use of estrogens in women postmenopausally.
Since osteoporosis began receiving national attention a few years ago, drug companies have been flooding drugstore shelves with dozens of calcium supplements. Just how effective are these over-the-counter supplements, and who needs to take them?
Calcium supplements in themselves, used as the only type of treatment, are probably of some value. Whether the calcium is over-the-counter or prescription doesn't matter as much as the quantity of calcium that's actually taken. the thing that you need to know about any type of calcium therapy is that what's recommended currently is between 1 and 2 grams per day of elemental calcium, and some of the over-the-counter preparations have you need to take a large number of pills or capsules or whatever to achieve this amount.
Lifestyle is an important factor in the development of osteoporosis as well. Studies have shown that intake of caffeine, alcohol, and smoking cigarettes can make you much more likely to get this crippling bone disease. Calcium is the vital link in preventing osteoporosis. The best sources of calcium are milk and cheese, but weight-conscious Americans are cutting back on their intake of dairy products and red meats. The low-fat varieties of milk and cheese are good sources of calcium too. And sardines for those avoiding red meat is also a good source of calcium, providing they have edible bones. Cooked vegetables are also a good source of calcium. Bok choy, Chinese cabbage, has only 10 calories a cup and about as much calcium as half a glass of milk. Exercise is also important. Studies have shown that women who exercise regularly are less likely to get osteoporosis. Finally, once the disease has been diagnosed, what can you do to treat it?
Let's take the usual setting, and that is when a woman in the postmenopausal state has had a fracture of a bone, maybe of the spine, and is found then to have osteoporosis. Most doctors would recommend adequate calcium intake, possibly some vitamin D supplementation, and usually estrogen therapy. The thing that I think we need to realize about osteoporosis is that none of the currently approved treatments actually increase the strength of the bones. What we can do with our current therapy is to prevent the bones from becoming weaker than they already are. But it has been shown on numerous occasions that by a combination usually of estrogen, calcium, vitamin D therapy, that the incidence of further fractures and so on can be decreased. There's also another newer therapy available called calcitonin, which is a hormone that has to do with regulating calcium levels, that has to be given by injection but is now approved by the FDA for therapy in osteoporosis. There's a third type of treatment, which is with fluoride, which is an agent that has been shown to increase bone mass, and the only one that is really known at this time. However, its effectiveness in osteoporosis is not conclusively demonstrated and is not currently approved by the FDA for this use.
Even if you're not at a high risk of developing osteoporosis, that doesn't mean that you should ignore the means of preventing it, since an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Once you have osteoporosis, it is difficult to treat.
We close out today's show with an encore presentation of some popular Senegalese musicians who appeared on Folks a year ago. They are Arfan Koyate and his wife Penda Diabete.
Sila la bilaline, la guine sila la bilaline. Sila la bilaline, Senegalais sila la bilaline. Sila la bilaline, Mali sila la bilaline. Sila la bilaline, Kodoware sila la bilaline. Ha, mbadeno wala wuli ni jigile mani.
Merci. Well, that's our program for this week. Thanks for watching. Next week, a look at a form of Chinese art. Be sure to check it out. Until that time, make it a good week. Bye-bye.